Thank you for joining us, Larry. So, a California State Assembly lawmaker proposed ABA 52, which would require courts to take race into consideration when doling out a sentence. Now, the bill's author also believed that the existing court system is racially biased and needs to be rectified. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. And David, thank you for having me. It's hard to start with how boneheaded and offensive this thing is. Courts are supposed to be colorblind. And the idea that if you commit a crime, somehow you did it because of your race is offensive on its nature. There are lots of people who come from terrible circumstances, poverty, homelessness, wrecked homes, who don't commit crime. If we don't hold people responsible for the decisions that they make, then anybody could argue that I've come from a disadvantaged background, and if I commit a crime, I'll get a pass because I can then plead to the court, please have mercy on me because of my race. It is deeply offensive. And by the way, I just saw an interview with a young lady who argued, she's in the entertainment field, David. She argued that white executives did not understand black culture, and that's why they needed to hire black people to do entertainment fair. So when you're asking the judge to take into consideration race, are you asking a white judge that you claim does not understand the black plight to take that into consideration? Are you asking black judges to take it more into consideration? And by the way, do we take into consideration the race of the victim? It is a sad truth that half of all the homicide victims in this country are black, and almost all of them are killed by other black people. So when a black person kills another black person, do we take the race of the victim into consideration? The whole thing is just complete and utter nonsense. It stands the whole notion of MLK of wanting to evaluate people based on content of character rather than color of skin completely and totally on its head.
Well, as you know, the California state legislature is very polarized and partisan. Since the bill was proposed by a Democrat, it has a good chance to get passed. What will happen when the bill does get passed?
Well, you know what's going to happen if it gets passed. It's going to be challenged. It's going to go up possibly to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will rule it unconstitutional because it violates the 14th Amendment equal protection. Why should a black person who commits a crime, or Hispanic or an Asian or a white person be treated differently given that he or she committed the same crime based on somebody's race? It'll be thrown out just as in California the Democrat lawmakers passed a bill and the governor signed it, mandating that every publicly held corporation in California have a female member on the board. It was thrown out as a violation of the 14th Amendment. Then there became another law that mandates every publicly held corporation in California have a member of the LGBTQ community. That's in the courts. It too will be kicked out because of the 14th Amendment. Reparations will also be challenged. It too will be turned down because of the 14th Amendment. And so will this. So it'll be an exercise in futility. It may take a few years, but ultimately the courts are going to rule it is a violation of the equal protection of the Constitution, the 14th Amendment.
I think the bill's author also realizes this, and the text of the bill is worded rather vaguely. It says the bill will require courts, whenever they have discretion to determine a sentence, to consider the disparate impact on historically disenfranchised and system-impacted populations. It didn't specifically say which race and how much race should be factored in during sentencing.
Yeah. And David, there was a time in our country when race was taken into consideration, except racists did it. The Emmett Till case, the famous case in 1955, where a Chicago kid was in, I think it was Mississippi, and he either whistled at a white woman or hit on her in some sort of way, and he was brutally murdered. And the men who were captured and charged were found not guilty by an all-white jury, and the all-white jury later on admitted that they knew very well that these men did it, but they set them free because of their race. So now we're going to take into consideration race in a different way by liberals, when in fact racist whites used to do that. It's completely unfair. There's a reason that there's a blindfold on Lady Liberty, and that blindfold is to show that justice is supposed to be blind.
Any thoughts you have on reducing crimes in general?
Many of these men who've committed these crimes came from homes without fathers. And if the legislature really wants to do something, they should talk about the epidemic of fatherlessness, where 70% of black kids now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. And the stats are clear, David. If you're raised without a dad, you're 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. 25% of blacks entered the world without a father in the home in 1965. Now that number is almost 70%. And I believe that the welfare state is incentivized incentivize women to marry the government and incentivize men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And that is one of the reasons why crime is so high in the black community. If these guys really want to do something, they ought to be addressing the root cause of all of this.
Thank you so much, Larry, for sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure.